Hey, it's Kate. I hope you're having a great day. Today, we're going to build a wooden garden arbor for my new cottage garden. So it needs to be a bit decorative and look nice, have some trellis space for climbing plants, be on the smaller side because this space is not that big, but it still needs to be built sturdy enough that it'll last. And I don't want to spend a ton of money.
So here's the lumber. I spent some time cutting it to length and sanding it earlier. I'm using 2x4s for the posts and top lintel pieces, and 1x2s for the other bits. And I have this coated wire mesh for the side trellises, which should kind of disappear once there's plants on it. Then for fasteners, I'll be using becking screws, and I will be pre-drilling most of the holes, especially through the 1x2 to avoid splitting. And I have stainless steel staples for the mesh, which should last longer than galvanized before rusting. Okay, let's get started. I've been working on the plans for this garden arbor for a while, and I decided the easiest way to build it was to assemble the two side frames first and then connect them together with the top lintel pieces. So I started measuring, and like any new project, I spent a while trying to figure out how I was going to hold the pieces and actually do it by myself. I devised a makeshift strategy and then executed it. I started at the bottom with the cross piece, then added more side pieces to help mount the wire mesh, and then added another cross piece to the top. After that, I added some diagonal bracing to keep the frame straight, and I did have to cut off a little bit so they would fit. So first frame down, it took longer than I hoped, but the second went together much faster. Another thing I did was I cut all the vertical end pieces at an angle, so when it rains, the water won't just sit on the end grain of the wood. Hopefully it will run off so the wood can last longer. So the next day I started on the mesh. I got the jigsaw out and then realized I could just cut it with sturdy wire cutters, and that would be much easier. Then I got one end of the mesh mounted and very carefully stretched the mesh to the other end of the frame so it could lay flat. And I wanted the mesh to be really sturdy and reliable, so I used some screws in a few spots, but otherwise I mostly used staples. And then I did the second frame the same. Now I was ready to put it all together with the top lintel pieces, which again, tricky. I had to think through the process. I did a lot of measuring, clamping, lined up the square 100 times, and dropped a few things. Eventually, I got the pieces screwed together, then realized I could have put the screws in from the back to hide them, but this will work fine. And again, I added diagonal braces so the legs would stay straight and it wouldn't collapse. Now here's the next tricky part by yourself. Turning the whole thing over really awkwardly so I can do the other side. Now this part might be somewhat optional. I decided to put the arbor on skids. I used old pallet slats, which should be hidden quickly as the plants grow. I figured this would add more stability and allow the arbor to be moved more easily in the future, just in case. As well, it will keep the legs out of the dirt so they'll last longer. Once the skids are on, I can tip it up. They made it surprisingly manageable to move around on my own. And it's actually not as heavy as I thought it would be, probably because I didn't use 4x4 posts, and cedar is usually lighter than treated wood. Then the last thing to add was the slats on the top, and then it's done. There were some tricky parts along the way, but it turned out great, and I think it's going to last really well. I will have to move it or secure it better for our winter storms, but for the summer, I just need to make sure it's level and sitting firmly on the ground.
I'm so happy with this. I think it looks great. And it's going to be even better once I get some plants climbing up it. I did make a few mistakes along the way, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. So my next step in the cottage garden is to get this garden arbor planted. So for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.